Welcome back, everyone. This is Moal Sumidai with the Pharma Vanguard, and I'm here with Andreas Gerloff, who is the Director of Medical Excellence Operations at Daiichi Sankyo Europe. Pleasure to have you here, Andreas.
Thanks so much for the invite. Pleasure
Yeah,
to be here.
we're glad to have you. So I've got a few questions for you.
Mhm.
So many describe medical affairs as moving from like a support function into a true strategic pillar alongside R&D and commercial.
Mhm.
When it comes to your experience of working with, medical affairs, where have you already seen medical affairs operating as like a peer to those functions, and where's the biggest gap to still close?
Mhm. So even though it makes me look quite old, but I have been in the industry in very early days where medical affairs was indeed more of an enabling and support function, where we had the times where commercial was developing the brand plans, and then it came this point where it's like, oh, there's a piece that also medical has to fill in, so please fill it in, whatever you guys do, right? That was also the time where the MSL role was much more of a data disseminator, going out and talking about the data only and making sure that everybody's aware of that. But we didn't think so much about the strategic function and what medical affairs can do in addition to that. That has really evolved over time, over the years, and there are different forces why that actually happened. When really medical affairs was much more also involved into the brand planning, the strategic planning. I think that is where we are really today, I would say. In many organizations. When you talk about the gaps, I would still say there is area for improvement when it comes to the alignment on objectives and how we measure success in general, right? Because it's like, yes, we have the overall strategy and how is medical contributing to that, and we have an eye-to-eye communication and discussion with commercial on that. But it's really, do we have the same objectives? Are we able to measure our success together on the same goals, right? That is still an area we need to improve as an organization or as an industry as a whole.
Hmm. So with therapies becoming more complex, how do you balance the need for scientific depth with the pressure to deliver faster insights to commercial and R&D colleagues?
I mean, this entire topic of insight generation, insight collection, I think became really one of the value drivers of medical affairs, right? So again, where also the MSL role moves from okay, I disseminate the data only to, oh, I actually need to understand what customer thinks about that. Are they aligned with what we think about this, the data? That is a very important piece and value drive for medical affairs. And for me, to be honest, there's not really a conflict here. So, I mean, what we expect from MSLs or also medical affairs as a whole now is to talk about our science, really making sure that the medical community is aware of that, but at the same time also collect insight around that we further communicate to our cross-functional partners. The challenge is rather that we have a lack of processes or tools very often. Right, so we have individuals on the ground, we have different sources how we collect insights, be it an advisory board, be it in other sources, but then really process that internally, making sure that we take actions based on that, and then really closing the loop back. I think that is where we are still struggling.
And so I've got another question around some data that I read on one of Veeva's white papers. So this particular data, it was a survey actually. It revealed that clinicians are most likely to share insights with pharma around evidence needs, which is like around 80%, and educational gaps, which is around 78%. How are biopharma companies reshaping their medical strategies to close those two loops so that insights from evidence generation and education can be utilized for launch success?
It comes a little bit back to what I just said, right? So I think we have a lot of ways how we collect this information or those insights. As I said, we do that via the MSLs. We do that, in advisory boards. We have medical information as a very, very good source. We have post-event surveys that we do to really understand, are there additional educational gaps? But again, challenge number one is to connect the data dots that we have there across the different channels where we collect information and then really translate that into action. I mean, very often we also tend to have a strategy in place that we are then trying to execute somehow, and to have this agility and flexibility to shape the strategy almost real time based on the feedback we receive is still a challenge for the majority of the organizations, I would say. It is possible, but it takes time to get us there.
Yeah, it does. In big environments, of course, it takes a
Exactly.
while.
You have a global organization, you have a regional organization, you have a local organization. Everybody has a saying into that, right? So it's yeah, it's a complex
It's
question.
a challenge. So, measuring impact is still a challenge across the industry. What frameworks or metrics have you found most effective for showing that medical affairs is not just an active, but like an impactful in shaping market outcomes for both patients and the markets?
I mean, this entire topic of medical impact measurement is really a hot topic now for several years, I would say, right? Everybody's trying internally how we can improve that further, moving away from, oh, we're just counting the number of activities that we do, the number of ad boards, the number of interactions, the number of whatever, right? So all the numbers do not talk about impact. There are several frameworks over the years now that have been developed. You know, there's one that came also from Veeva. There are other frameworks out there, and everybody's experimenting internally, I would say. For me personally, it's not this one specific metric that shows the value of medical affairs. It's actually a range of metrics that can tell the story, right? So where we really start with what are the activities that we do, or even further, what are the objectives we are trying to achieve? What are the activities we do around that? What is the belief change that it leads to, right? What is the clinical behavior change that it leads to? And ultimately also, what is the patient outcome? And again, along this train of thought, you need to identify what are the measurements, where do we have data available, what can we actually measure. And again, the pressure for improving, moving us into this direction is again, becoming a more strategic organization. And also, we need to prove somehow the value of medical affairs. There were significant investments into medical affairs over the last years. Of course, everybody wants to understand what is the return on investment for medical affairs, so to say, right? And therefore, we are really trying to find ways also how do we show value, because it's not only about sales numbers. There are much more that we can actually, where we can actually impact.
Hmm. Hmm. And it is interesting because it was, I mean, 20 years ago when I first started getting into this industry, it was a new function.
Yeah.
And that function is now evolving into more like medical education, relationship building with the
Yeah.
physicians, with the patients, right? Understanding the patient populations and reporting that information back. I mean, we used to have sales, competitive intelligence, different groups. So, like, how is it shifting now into this new role and this new function?
Again, right? So it's we almost need to reinvent ourselves, right? And but not only for medical affairs, for the entire operating model of pharma, I would say. I mean, it's very clear that patients are more educated today. HCPs have a different need when it comes to medical education, right? So as latest during Corona, what has been shown is, I mean, they want to get more medical affairs touch points, right? So they want to have more engagement with medical affairs, because if they want to have a good discussion, it's rather someone from medical affairs than the commercial organization, right? So, and that all those knowledge about, you know, the change of the healthcare ecosystem, the change of the needs of our patients, the change of the needs of our customers, really is a force onto medical affairs to reinvent themselves and really moving beyond the enabling support function that has been there in the past.
Mm-hmm. So, Andreas, I'm going to shift a little bit and move towards AI because that's the biggest buzzword these days. So, it's often touted as the future of medical affairs, right? Uh, whether it's KOL mapping, whether it's insights generation, whether, education tailoring. So, from your vantage point, where does AI truly add value today? And do you think it's still hype, or, is there actual potential in the future here?
I mean, as you said, right, AI is really a big thing, and even at this conference here, I mean, there's so many sessions that really touch on this topic, right? I personally believe when thinking about the potential of AI, it can touch all the process steps or everything we do within medical affairs or beyond, right? You've talked about a few things around insight collection and analysis, personalization of our communication, understanding of our customer needs. I mean, if you really think about the entire operating model, the value steps that we have, AI can have an impact on all of them. And all the pharma companies do a lot of internal experimentation, and where that really works, I think we are still in the early days to see results out of that, I would say, right? So at least at scale, there's still a lot of proof of concept, and there are tools out there that are, the landscape is growing day by day almost, right? I think one part and that was something I'm personally super passionate about, is we sometimes forget to think about the question how AI is actually influencing our stakeholders and customers. And we just want to quote one other report on that. There's a report that came out recently from IQVIA that showed that 50%, more than 50% of HCPs use GenAI already for scientific information. If you look into the HCP group of those that have been born after 1990 and later, it's actually 75%, right? And the other piece of information in this report is when they have to rank the value of the different information sources, they rank GenAI very close to the MSLs. And that is something we really, really need to think about, right? If we see a future where our target audience, so to say, our HCPs, are going into publicly available GenAI to get their information, where's the role of pharma, where's the role of medical affairs when it comes to medical education, right? So it's not only about improving our internal processes and getting faster and getting more personalized and it's all moving in the right direction, but you could think that it's also only an interim step. Because again, if they at one point, our customers are not coming to us anymore for any educational purposes or any questions because they find other sources themselves, then that puts us also in a very difficult position, right? So we need to think about what is happening on the other side and how do we actually contribute to that so that we are not missing really the point and the real movement here.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, nowadays AI can make mistakes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's up to the biopharmaceutical company to really correct those misunderstandings, right? I mean, you can look at a black label, right, of any medical product. You could look at the scientific papers of any medical product, but if a physician, all they know is medicine, but not technology necessarily, and they rely on the information that's provided by AI, right, it may be wrong.
Interesting, in the very same report, right? They also asked the question around: do you check the sources of what GenAI is? And again, we just thought about ChatGPT, basically, right? Did you check the sources? On the positive side, it would say 86% said yes, but you need to think about the other 14%. Right? So they don't even check the sources anymore before they take the information for their clinical decision making. And I personally believe this number will just grow because people are building trust with the tool itself, and then they're very busy and they're without seeing patients, and they're in front of the patient. They just ask a question, they put it in and get the answer, and they just treat them accordingly. Exactly, they respond to that. It's just it's all driven also by convenience, right? And we need to. We will never manage to be there at this point of time really when they need this piece of information, right? So therefore we need to think about, okay, where is our customer really, and how do we make sure we get the right information into those tools and solutions so that at the end they treat their patients correctly with the right information at their fingertip, right?
And here I'm thinking off topic, like an MSL application that is powered by AI offered by the enterprise. Oh, I have a question about this medical product. Let me go to the true source of information that will provide me reliable answers rather than relying on their own private AIs to do that work.
And the point here is, and that is also what I think we need to discuss more as an entire industry, those solutions will probably not be developed by individual pharma companies. Where do we need to collaborate to really develop those solutions that make a difference for our customers, to be truly customer-centric at the very end, right? Because if you have an open conversation with customers and ask about what are the pain points in their clinical practice and all that, they will all say, we don't have time, we have a lot of patients that we need to see. And then whenever they need information from a company, they don't want to go to 10 different sources or use 10 different apps or whatever it is at the end, right? So ideally want to go one place where they want to go to, right? And and I'm very convinced if we as a pharma industry don't create it ourselves, someone else will do it for us, so to say, right? So it needs another level of collaboration across the industry, I would say. But it's still a long way to go because there's a strong belief about competition, and we are very proud of our marketing messages and all how we operate. So we need to overcome some of those challenges and find solutions to really make a difference for our customers.
And my last question, Andreas, is looking 5 years ahead. What would you say are some cultural or organizational shifts that you believe medical affairs teams will need to make to fulfill their strategic potential?
I mean, I believe, again, personally in medical affairs, we need to continue stepping up, right? So again, it's very often not that the other organization help us up. We need to show the value ourselves, so to say, and we need to step up ourselves and being really the strategic partner. We should not shy away from difficult decision making. We should not shy away from having difficult conversation. We should think about the future in general and also take the other organizations with us, so to say, right? Because the big difference is also very often from my experience between, for example, medical and commercial. Medical affairs is all very often future oriented, on further down the line, so to say, right? So because it's what is a new product coming in 2 years, 5 years, and so on and so forth. And commercial is rather more short-term thinking, right? I mean, to deliver numbers for this year, fiscal year, next fiscal year, and so on and so forth. And there's sometimes a little bit of a conflict here from a time horizon perspective. But again, medical affairs need to step up, moving beyond the support enabling function, having an eye-level discussion with our peers, but at the same time, as I just said, don't forget about the trends for our customers, because we may miss a point here, we may miss a mega trend that takes us totally out of the equation at the very end, and we need to be careful that this is not happening.
Thank you. Andreas Gerloff from Daiichi, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.